Yo, what's up, everyone? It's your boy Opti. We're back for another Simply Bitcoin TTO. I'm super excited for this one. I got a good friend that came in today. And every time we have these conversations, I literally was just on his podcast. I think it was 3 weeks ago or something. And I went on an epic, like 2-3 hour rant about this. We're not going to stay here for 3 hours, guys. But me and Brandon have these conversations probably every day, every other day on Twitter Spaces. And I wanted to bring the conversation to Simply Bitcoin because not everyone hangs out on Twitter Spaces. And I think this is not only great framing in regards to what we're doing here as Bitcoiners, but it really is an inspiring message. And that's what we're really about here on TTO is framing what we're doing correctly, making sure we're lowering our time preference and understanding the significance of what we are doing here as Bitcoiners. Anyways, Brandon, aka Brandon Gentile on Twitter, and he has a YouTube show that he just dropped called Freedom Isn't Free. Hence, that's what we're calling this one today, because that is the crux of the situation of everything we're doing here. Anyways, Brandon, how you doing, bro? Good to have you. We did have some troubleshooting issues, but no worries.
Hey, it's classic, right? It's good to see you, brother. Appreciate you having me on. And yeah, the spaces, what you guys run is incredible. And hopefully there's 10,000 more people doing just this very thing a year or two from now and leading that 3% charge, right?
There we go. Well, you already dropped it on him. So this, I think you told me this, 2 months ago or something, and it really blew my mind. So before we get into it, maybe some context. Brandon always reminds me about the American Revolution and how the founding fathers gave us freedom, gave us liberty, and gave us a country based on these ideals. And it only took the 3%. Now, Brandon, jump there, give us that context, and then we'll have a little conversation and we'll continue down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we get in this echo chamber sometimes, obviously, thinking about all that has to be done, right? And the people we need to orange pill, the people we need to educate, the people we need to red pill, whatever it might be. And you really do have to take a step back and understand that it's only a small amount of people, quite honestly, in the grand scheme of things, that you need to lead the charge. And you're never going to have 100% of people agree with you in anything in life, right? And you have to realize that it's a select few. It's a select few people, the people that have the ears to hear and the eyes to see. That's it. That's all you need. And if you, again, the part of that 3 hour rant that you went on my pod the other day, a lot of it was talking about, religion, nature's law, things like that, a higher being, nature's, law, the calling, the thing you feel inside of you, whatever people want to talk about it as or refer to it as. There's only so many people. But if you read the Bible, and you're a student of the Bible, whether you're religious or not, studying the Bible might be a good thing to do for you potentially. But there's a lot of readings, a lot of things in there that talk about that. The poor will always be among you, things of that nature, understanding that there's going to be people who just, for whatever reason, they just choose not to see. They don't want to see. Truth can hit them in the face 1,000 times over and they will not see. And that's just life. And you have to understand that. You have to be okay with that. And that's something that it's taken me a long time. I'm 36 years old, and it's taken me a long time, especially when you're younger, right? As an alpha male, playing hockey, things like that. And you think everyone's a jock. Everyone wants to get after it. Everyone wants to, get better. Everyone wants to do this. And you look around you, and there was people playing professional hockey. A lot of people I was around, a lot of them didn't want to get better. And it blew me away, and it just didn't make any sense to me. And I didn't understand how there weren't people who were always trying to get better every single day, thinking about the meals they ate, thinking about, taking care of their body, and on and on and on. And most people just don't think like that, even at the highest levels of society. So when you have that, and then you look at government, and people just think like, well, those people they're taking care of themselves. They're going to take care of the rest of us. They're going to, if people in elite levels of society, then you read, I really resonated with David Goggins' book, You Can't Hurt Me. And he talked about the very same thing. He got to the SEAL teams, and he said the same thing. He looked around, he's like, all right, guys, let's go work out. And they're like, we made it, man. We're good. And I really resonated with that. Playing professional hockey, it was the same kind of attitude in those circles as well. And that's majority of human beings, and that's life. And you have to understand that. But the good part is, the hope-filled part is, you need to put in your work and your effort, because that is the test of life. Those that have the ears to hear and the eyes to see, we have a duty. We have a different sense of duty to go do those things and lead the people that are going to be the other leaders who have those ears to hear, to come and be that 3% to affect change.
Oof, starting strong. And we'll get into the winner's mentality stuff because that's really what I originally had the idea with TTO is kind of trying to instill that winner's mentality and show all you guys out there that being a Bitcoiner means you're a winner, but it doesn't just stop with you stacking sats, with you saving in Bitcoin. It's about creating more in your life and creating that abundance in your life through scarcity, through digital scarcity. But I want to come back a little bit because you touched on a few things, and I've been going back and forth on this one. You basically touched on the Pareto principle, and this is something I keep trying to explain to people. And I talk to my friends and I try to explain to them, and we always ask ourselves the same question, like, how many people in the world get it? And by it can mean whatever you want it to be. And I always lean on the Pareto principle of like probably 20% of the population get it and the other 80%, not to be harsh, but as common nomenclature would say, are the sheep. They're the sheeple, they're the normies, is that 80% of the population that, just wants to dig their head in the sand and forget about everything. The cipher from the Matrix. They just want to eat the steak and unplug. And I don't blame them. At times, I wish I was one of the 80%, but I'm starting to realize I don't have a choice in this matter. I am part of that 20%. And the real question for you, Brandon, and actually, I think I already know the answer, but is it less than 20% of the population that really gets it? Is it less of the 20% of the population that we need to really effectuate change? And I already know the answer because we've had these conversations, but for the people out there, let's dive into this. What do you think is the actual number, percentage wise, obviously speculating in its guess, where things fundamentally change, where once we get to this percentage of the population, then things are fundamentally different. And I have kind of an idea on this as well. It's based on the bell curve meme, but I'll wait to come in. So, Brandon, what would be your thoughts? We know we start with that 3%. The founding fathers were 3% of the American population at the turn of the century when they won us freedom as a country, and they inspired the rest. And at what point do you think does everyone get freedom? And in our case, obviously, we're less than 3% of the population that hodls Bitcoin. But at what percentage do you think is the final tipping point?
Well, again, going back to biblical numbers, I mean, 10 is one of them. Obviously, 10% or 10% tithing, things like that, and that's always a number that gets thrown around a lot throughout the course of life and also throughout the Bible. But 3% as well. I would stick with around 3%. I mean, there's a lot of argument to be made around that. Like you said, the American Revolution was 3% of people, the founding fathers leading the charge, and quite honestly, this is something like people can look into, like the Black Robe Regiment, pastors and priests that were leading the charge, literally leading the charge of the American Revolution, grabbing their muskets in the church and running out the door and saying, "Let's go, we're taking the British on," and they were the ones leading the charge. People, again, when history is out there for people who want to see it, right? The history for people who want to see, or the ears to hear, right? And most of it is not taught. And again, people can speculate as to why that is. I have my own answers, as we talk about all the time, of why things aren't taught specifically. But the British came over here and they were taking out priests. They were trying to take out churches and take out priests because those are the ones leading the charge. And again, look up the Black Robe Regiment. There were white priests and pastors. There were black priests and pastors. People, they've just been erased from history. These religious figures, blacks, whites, everyone, different cultures, completely erased from history, and very few, if any. I mean, we're talking way less than 3. We're talking 0.003% of people even remotely know that was the case. And how can you not know your history? How can these people not be put on a pedestal like true heroes? And the leaders of this, outside the founding fathers I'm talking about. And so it really is a small minority that can affect the change and wake the other people up. So it may be less than 3%, but I would say 3%. We see that from the revolution. Those are the people that are fighting the war. And then more people started to come into the fold afterward. Obviously, those dominoes start falling, and then people start getting, so like, well, for instance, when I was younger, I used to think that everyone needs to believe what I'm saying because this is truth. It's objective truth. And again, objective truth doesn't sell very well, right? It's emotion. People, they make decisions based on emotion and then they justify it with logic later. And I was always backwards. I was always thinking logic and trying to sell logic when I was younger, in my teens and my early 20s. And then when I got into business and things like that, then I realized it's opposite, Brandon. That's why no one was believing you when you were younger, and maybe being a teenager didn't help as well either. But you don't need many people. But once those people start making sense, I guess, or world events start showing them to be correct, or they start winning the war, that's when the other 4%, 5, 10%, 20% of people start coming in and saying, hey, look, great, we're winning. And, it's the old saying of, I think it was Thomas Paine of, are you a winter soldier or a summer patriot or a winter soldier? And, what kind of person are you? Are you there in the tough times during the winter, or are you just there in the summer? Are you just there to hang out and have fun? Like, ooh, we're winning. Great. Like, you guys look like you're winning. I'm just going to jump in now. And that's really the times, again, the Thomas Paine, going back to Thomas Paine, is the times that try men's souls. So some great books, pamphlets that he wrote back then to think about times of now, Common Sense, and the times that try men's souls. That we're in those times going forward. Are we going to stand and fight? We saw it in the last couple of years, obviously. People that stood. I was just listening to Ron Paul actually earlier today, talking about the draft coming up and trying to institute a limited draft. And that was self-selection in and of itself. They want to potentially self-select people, or select people, or draft people from self-selection. Well, what does that mean? It means anyone who signed up, any male who signed up when they were 18 years old. Well, did you do that? Did you sign up when you were 18? That's self-selection. You were saying, because they know who you are. They give a social security number six minutes after you're born. I've had 4 children, and to this day, I mean, it gives me chills every time they're like, okay, we're going to fill it out. It was like not even 24 hours after every kid was born, and you're sitting there and you're helpless. You're just like, what is going on? And they're numbered. You're numbered so they can assign debt to you. You're being assigned your portion of the American debt at birth. That's how they do it. It's through the social security system. You're numbered and you are assigned that amount of debt, and so they can track you like a number throughout the rest of your life. And so they know who you are. You're turning 18, and all of a sudden you're gone. They lost you. They don't know where you went. No, you're self-selecting, because they're seeing who is going to self-select, who is going to follow and obey orders. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with Executive Order 6102, gold. Who's going to give their gold up? Who's willingly going to do this? Same thing with gun confiscation, and on and on and on. You can see this pattern start to play out over time.
Oof, man. So many rabbit holes to go down there. Whether it's the chattel, that you're just a number, your debt's being assigned to you at the instant you are born. But I really want to go back a little bit, because I also was really or rather have been low-key disillusioned with humanity since 2020. Like, I'm team human. I think humans are the greatest, and also at times the worst. And since 2020, it's been, I don't know, bitter pill to swallow. It's like, man, I really thought there was more critical thinkers out there. I really thought humans would believe in freedom more, and they just cowered and they got scared. And it really is one of those disheartening moments where you realize, wow, I really might be alone in this. And hence why I'm always advocating for people to get in touch with other like-minded individuals, other Bitcoiners. Make sure that these people are around you, because when the times get tough, man, you want other people to lean on, to have these conversations with, to basically reflect back to yourself that you are not actually crazy, that everyone else has gone mad and it's not you. But before we go into some of these other conversations, first, I also remember being frustrated as a kid and trying to speak truth to people, and they're just like, shut up, Opti, what are you talking about? You don't know anything. And I'm like, no, I see it. Like, what's the Adam Sandler, like, stay in school. Like, you do one of those things. Man. But back to the what I think, I'll put my numbers out since I said I was going to do it. I really do believe in that 3% number that you're telling us, because we have those historical records for it. But I saw this other metric, and I'm blanking on where I got the metric from, but it basically said something on the same lines. And I read this probably like 2 days before you told me the same thing. And so it was like one of those like hammers of like, oh, wow, like maybe I'm onto something here. But it was essentially that for adoption, I think it was for a fad or something. I forget what it was exactly. Maybe it was marketing or something like that. Researching marketing so we can get better at business and all this stuff. And it said something on the lines of, it takes 3 to 5% of people to adopt something. And then once you have those ardent believers in that 3 to 5%, then that 3 to 5% inspires the 15%. And then somewhere around that 13 to 15% range is when it becomes ubiquitous with everything. And it's like, it happens overnight. And I think again, we're speculating. I think that's where we are right now. Like, we need 3 to 5% of ardent Bitcoin maxis out there, of true believers, the Bitcoin remnant, if you will. And then after that 3 to 5%, then everyone, each one will teach one, and everyone else will have a few friends that are Bitcoiners that are, understand what's going on. And as we ripple through population at a certain tipping point, whether that's that 13, 15%, 10%, 20%, we really don't know. But we know there is a tipping point in regards to adoption. And it's a lot smaller than we even understand. Like right now, the whole world's not even on the internet. I think it's like half of the population is on the internet, and it's not like we're ever going to go back to a time without the internet. And people are still like, most of us are lulled to sleep in the first world, where we think like, oh yeah, everyone's on the internet, bro. And it's like, nah, I think it's somewhere between like 3.8 billion people, maybe 4 billion people on the internet right now. And you think we're going to go back to a world without the internet? It's like, no, bro, like not everyone is even on the internet today, and there's no going back. And so it's kind of back to the idea of, what are we really doing here in Bitcoin adoption? Advocating Bitcoin, number go up is obviously going to bring people in, but do we need every single person to be a Bitcoiner in the short term? Like, I don't think so. I think we just need that ardent believer. What's the saying? Quality over quantity. I think this is where we are. And I think the only reason I'm kind of bringing this up is we're basically at the tail end of a bear market, the beginning of a bull market. I have noticed a lot of my friends are getting that bear market fatigue, and they're getting angry and they're lashing out and everyone's attacking each other. And you just kind of want to reframe the conversation for people of like, guys, we're winning. Just keep your head on. That's why I'm always saying, like, get outside, touch some grass. Like, the person you are arguing with on Twitter will be there when you come back. Like, keep your head in the game, guys, because this is a marathon, not a sprint. And I think a lot of people forget this. We get short-sighted. We get greedy. We want things to happen overnight. And this is why I love these conversations with you, Brandon, because you keep my head in the game as well. We're like, we bounce these ideas off each other, and it's like, okay, I'm not the only one seeing the same thing in the world. And as much as I try to do my best to avoid groupthink, it helps having other people, like-minded individuals around you that are seeing the same thing as you are. So you remember that you're not actually crazy here. Like, you are seeing the world clearly. And I think this is my market thesis here, is like, if Bitcoiners are correct, which I truly believe we are correct, then we shall prosper moving forward. And via that prosperity, it shows that we are actually correct. And we shouldn't shy away from this fact of, hey, your life's going to get better. You will accumulate wealth. You will have cash flow come in. You will build a business that does well. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's like, this is proof that we are aligned with natural law, that our philosophies and our worldview is correct, and to double down on that. And hence why it's like, hey, man, it's that winner's mentality. Get fit physically, mentally, spiritually, and make sure everything is in a row, because like, what are we doing here? And I think you and I, Brandon, have kind of talked about this before, of being the billboard. Like, you are the message in regards to that Bitcoin signal. And I don't think a lot of Bitcoiners even acknowledge this. They don't even like groom themselves. They don't dress well. They probably stink a little bit. Bitcoin anons out there that don't care what they look like. And I think you and I keep going back and forth on this idea. It's like, you are the message. Live the message, because people want to live a good life. And the only way we can really spread this message is by living that good life. And people can look to us and be like, oh, I want what he has. How is he so optimistic in the face of the world burning? And you're like, here's Bitcoin. So, Brandon, I ranted enough. This is about you. What's your thoughts on that idea of living the message? What's the best way to spread Bitcoin, to orange pill people? What does the road of Bitcoin adoption look for you?
Well, you make great points there, and I think of courage. Courage is contagious, and that's why I love what you guys do. It's what I try to do with my channel, the blog, with writing, whatever it is, Bitcoin trading cards, what we're doing there, and putting out education, what I'm doing with my 4 young children, right? Everything that I do, what you guys are doing, the people I associate myself with now over the last year, has to do with orange pilling people. It has to do with monetary education, quite honestly, and freedom and liberty. That's the number one thing. And I go back to a lot of the last few months, and we talked about it obviously on the spaces after the Simply show, is laying down your life and picking up your cross. And I keep coming back to that a lot. And I have a strong faith. And we talked about this a lot on mine when I was interviewing you, and I just think about that a lot. And it just goes back to doing the right thing, doing what's in your heart, doing following your conscience and your intuition in a way, and doing, because the thing I think of, my grandfather died like last January, so a year and a half ago, and he was 88 years old, lived an amazing life, but he died suddenly. It sounded weird. Sounds weird to say at 88 years old, but he was out traveling. He didn't stop one lick during the lockdowns. He was out traveling, going to Florida. We're in Michigan here, so he was just out, cruising, doing whatever. Like, he didn't stop one lick, and it's a good thing he didn't, because he's only lived a year or two more. And but he was healthy as a horse. He was 6'2", probably 190 pounds. Like, he was dancing still, going to dance class and doing all this stuff. My point with saying all this is that you never know what you're given, and how much time you're given. But also, what really hit me though was thinking about a biblical verse of, from dust you came, to dust you shall return. And it's one of the most humbling phrases or verses you can ever hear, because you came into this world literally as dust, as nothing, and you will go out that way. And it makes you realize and put everything into perspective of, like, what am I doing, and why am I doing it, and how am I doing it, and how do I want to be remembered? Because you ain't taking any of it with you. There's nothing that you're taking with you. So you're not taking anything. I mean, Knut might argue that you're taking your Bitcoin seed phrase in your head if you don't give it to anybody, but you're just not taking anything. So what are you doing here on this earth? What are you doing to make this place better? And it really starts to change everything you're doing as a human being. You start leaving this fiat world, the sinking fiat legacy monetary system Titanic that's slowly slipping under the waves. And as Bitcoiners, we get to we're on the life raft, right? Everyone's on the Titanic, still arguing with you and yelling at you, saying how, well, those seas are volatile. Get out of that Bitcoin life raft. Yeah, look at those dangerous seas you're entering. And you're like, guys, I'm backing away from this ship and it's going down. And these people are arguing and saying, it's not going down. What are you talking about? It's the US dollar. You know how strong this thing is? You know how many aircraft carriers we have? This thing is backed by oil, right? And they're just arguing. And I go back to staying humble. And like you said, the billboard, staying humble and stack sats. It's the truest thing. And again, we're human, so we can tend to get toxic at times, or we can tend to want to rub it in people's faces, or we can, the wins, because the wins keep stacking up for Bitcoiners. If anyone's looked around lately in the world and what's going on, whether it's the president, the United States has, or the people running for office, or things that are going on around the world, dominoes falling, or whatever it is. I mean, there's wins that keep stacking up for Bitcoiners, like every day. I mean, I think the last month or two, your guys' show has just been like wins, like massive Bitcoin wins. Like every single day, the title of the show is like another win. And it's just like, holy cow, like what's going on? And that's just continuing to speed up. So it's how can we show up as the best version of ourselves possible? Because yes, at the end of the day, being toxic, unpopular opinion is not going to get like the average normie to come in and come into the Bitcoin network. It's just not, because most people, like we said, the 97% outside of the 3% you can be toxic with. It's kind of like a locker room attitude, whether it's guys or gals. They're, might be a little more abrasive. They're maybe more alpha people, and maybe have some more testosterone in them, whatever it is, however you want to define it. Well, those people can tend to be a little more abrasive, a little more locker room-esque, and that's fine. But the other 97%, they want to be talked down to, or like they don't want to like be jabbing at each other, or trading barbs and things like that. They're not into that, and they're never going to be that way. So that's where, again, as Bitcoiners, we have to, everyone has their place in orange pilling the world, and doing it in a different way, showing up as a person you want to be. I was seeing here too, hydrate, obviously take care of yourself, touch some grass, things like that, and be present, be humble. And that's how we're going to attract the most amount of people the fastest, because at the end of the day, in wrapping this up, I think truly I want to speed up adoption. It's not to like gain more purchasing power. That's great and all. Like that's a side benefit. But to me, it's like, I want to minimize collateral damage. Again, I have 4 young children. Like I don't want, it's the joke I've said many times too on Simply, where I don't want to be living in Back to the Future 2 when it's Biff Tannen's Pleasure Paradise, and you're like going to the gas station to get gas, and you have a shotgun. You're sitting in the front seat with a shotgun, a 12 gauge. That's not going to be a fun world to live in, but that's a world we can make for ourselves as human beings if we're not careful, and we're being ridiculous about things, or we're not taking things seriously, or we're not putting ourselves out there quite honestly. And that's why I put myself out there. Like, I'm an introverted person. I'm a quiet person by nature. I'm introverted. I was like in hockey growing up. I was captains of my teams always throughout the years. And I just led by example. I was like, go put my head down, go to work, and lead by example. I didn't open my mouth too much. But now it's like that things change. I had, like in business, you have to do that more, but also like, hey, I've got a family to take care of, and I don't want them to live in this world that's literally going to hell in a handbasket. And that's very obvious to anyone who's paying attention. And that's where, if I can do something a little bit and change one person a day or one person a week, then that's one less person that's going to create havoc or chaos in the future for me or for my children or for my family or my friends or the people around me. Because that's the biggest thing. Like, you can have all the Bitcoin in the world, or you can have whatever you want, but again, if the world's on fire all around you and everything's blown up, then it's not going to matter, unfortunately. And that's this chasm, this gap we're trying to bridge somehow. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things that we have to kind of get through to the other side. I think the backside of that is unbelievable. I mean, it's unbelievably prosperous, abundant. I have great hope, and that's what does keep me very hopeful. But we do have to get through this interim period here, maybe over the next year or two, the next couple of years, this decade, where what's going to happen? Are enough people going to show up? Are 3% going to show up and help the world move across this rickety old bridge, one person at a time? Because we can't all cram onto it at the same time necessarily. We got to get over this bridge somehow, and the 3% have to show up to be able to help people across that bridge.
Man, I love that metaphor right there, and I'm getting chills over here, bro. Thank you, Brandon. And lately, I've been asking myself the same question. Like, remember, you are going to die. Like, this is uncontentious. You're not going to live forever. And as a young also kid who was team captain of my sports teams, I always felt invincible. And recently, I'm having that face yourself in the mirror moment and asking myself, like, have I put everything on the table? Have I left no stone unturned? Am I giving it my all? Because I am going to die. And if I'm being honest, I'm like, no, I can do more. I can continue to do more. And, like, I'm not done. And every morning I'm just waking up like, I have another day to continue to do good stuff. And then a little side tangent, and then I'm going to tee you up again. Bitcoiners are bad at marketing. I think this is uncontentious at this point, because we have the best money in the world, and yet everyone still yells at normies like, you're an idiot. Okay, I digress. You said something earlier, and I did title the show today, Freedom Isn't Free. And you said, and I love the way you keep saying this, and you say it all the time in spaces as well, like, pick up your cross. And so I'm gonna connect two thoughts here, Brandon. First, obviously, the idea of freedom isn't free. It's gonna take work. It's gonna take hard work. And we are Americans. We are America first. I want to see America prosper. I do not want to leave. I'm a first generation America. I love my American. I love my home. I think America is the greatest country in the world. As you can tell, I have a great English accent because I don't even speak my own mother language. But that's besides the point. Like, I am an American. And Nico and I kind of joke about this all the time. More Nico than me, on the idea of, if America gets worse, are we going to have to go to El Salvador? And I'm always like pushing back, and I'm like, bro, like, to me, it starts to feel like I'm being a coward by picking up and running. And it's back to this idea of like, freedom isn't free. And I think it's going to take the same amount of true Americans, true Bitcoin believers, to be like, no, I am not fucking leaving. Sorry to cuss, but this is how I feel. Like, I'm staying, I'm fighting. This is my country. I'm not going to let the unproductive parasite class take the land that was given to us. And you have a lot of great quotes from the past. I forget which one it is, but something on the lines of, if Americans aren't vigilant, they will wake up in a land. They will wake up slaves in the land that their fathers fought for, or whatever.
Yeah. It's the old Thomas Jefferson quote. Yeah. And I forget it now, but you paraphrased it pretty well. It's, if they're not careful, I think it might have to do with private bankers, actually. And if they let the private banking system build up around them, then they'll wake up one day, basically servants on the land their forefathers, conquered. So it's and then the Plato one we always talk about too, right? If you're not involved in politics, or if you're not in your local community and understanding what's going on, you will be governed by your inferiors. And there's all this wisdom of the past that we tend not to, we don't heed it. We talked about earlier. I mean, there's degrees now in America. You don't even have to take history. There's history degrees now in America at colleges, certain colleges. You don't even have to take a history class in order to get the degree. So it just shows you the fundamental problems we have with the money. Obviously, follow the money, and in the schooling system. And you mentioned this. I mean, so leaving, this is a really big subject. The brain drain, that's a real thing. Like I grew up in Michigan, and Detroit is an unbelievable example. The biggest city in the world, 75 years ago, and it's non-existent. Like it's been built up, and it's coming back, and the downtown's beautiful now and things like that. But there's like a ring around there that's still just barren and desolate. And it's went from the biggest city in the world to all of a sudden you start having people that don't have freedom on their mind running the city. The money's breaking, and the corporations are doing things they shouldn't be doing, and so people are leaving. They're like, I'm out of here. Well, that brain drain can happen in a city, or it can happen in a state, which it happens in a lot of states, as we've seen especially the last few years. And it can happen to countries, and that is a very real thing, a very scary thing that we have to be very cognizant of. I think about Kiyosaki, Robert Kiyosaki, talking about a story about one of his roommates at the Merchant Marine Academy, and he was Jewish, and he just said, hey, like what happened to your to your family, like how'd you get over here? It's like, oh yeah, well, my family, we're Jewish, and we lived in Germany, and it was him, it must have been, it was him and his parents, so it would be like our grandparents in essence. And he was like, yeah, well, we ended up leaving. We could see what Hitler was doing, and he was, it's like, it was getting really crazy over there in the early to mid 30s. And then he was just like, well, it's okay. So you guys came over. Like, yeah, we decided, like, hey, we're coming over. Like, we're leaving here. We're getting out of here. But people there were like, oh no, he's gonna change. Things are gonna change. Like he'll figure it out. It's not gonna be this crazy for that long. And blah blah blah. And then he just asked me, he's like, so your family came over, and then what happened to everyone else? He's like, oh, everyone else that stayed, they ended up in concentration camps. And it was like an alarming, it's like you didn't expect it to abruptly kind of end like that, but it gives you, and all of our forefathers, right? Your family, and all of our ancestors did the same thing. They were running from very similar things. And so I say all this because I have felt very patriotic my entire life. I'd never served in the military. I always felt guilty that I did not. I wanted to be a Navy SEAL and a fighter pilot my entire life. And I ended up playing hockey, and that was my thing. And my goal was to play for the U.S. national team. And I played for the under 17 and under 18 U.S. national team. So I wore the jersey, like I wore the sweater, the crest, and the flag on my, it's one of my, prized, highlights of my life. Like that's something that makes me very proud. But at the same time, I know now later on in life, like my military, like wanting to do that, I honestly don't know if I could anymore. And I have utmost respect for people that do that. And I have so many friends that are in the military, but I don't know if I could go in voluntarily and do that job anymore. And I wanted to my entire life. So that over the last like 5 years of understanding Bitcoin, understanding the world at this level, it's like the most humbling like transition I've ever gone through in my life. And it's like, it makes me emotional because I'm like, wow, I don't even know how I was that way growing up almost, and seeing such a different side of things. And so that's a very real thing that you brought up. And it's something that digs deep into my core, being someone who always prided himself in the Constitution, things of that nature, all the way up through hearing these stories like I just told about Kiyosaki, and then playing for the U.S. national team and saying, hey, I'm not, but I'm going to be real. Like, I thought of it too. And I thought, what are contingency plans? Like, will we, like you said with Nico, do we have to move to El Salvador someday? Like, what's going to happen? And that's not something as a Bitcoiner, or someone who's humble enough to say, hey, again, I need to lay down my life sometimes to pick up my cross. And what is the truth? Like, what do I truly need to do? Yeah. I mean, part of me is as a fighter is, hey, I'm not going to leave. I will fight it out here. I'll go down swinging. So that's generally how I am, and probably what will end up happening, because I'm a little bit stubborn as well. And hopefully it doesn't get to that point. But that's something that if you're alive at all and thinking person at all, that's something that definitely has gone through your head. And I think most Bitcoiners have probably thought of that, because it is something that's very real, and you have to kind of assess what is going on. I think the one big difference, though, and I'll kind of end this with this, is we have different forms of protection here, fortunately, that the Jewish people, like the example I gave, didn't have, right? Or that was taken away from them. And again, we go back to being a self-selector and saying, oh yeah, here government, here's my gold, oh yeah, here's my Bitcoin, or hey, yeah, here's this, like take it from me, or like I'm self-selecting, I'm just gonna give it to you, and like you're just a number in the system. I think that's where more people, because all this is psychological, everything is psychological, money is psychological, all these things are psychological. And this is where the lockdowns of people would have just stood up. 3% of people would have stood up instead of 3 people. There's a few business owners in the entire state of Michigan, I think, that stood up. 3, that's it. But if 3% of the people stood up, boom, it's completely different. Game changer. There's no lockdowns happening. There's nothing happening. 3% is all you need. It's, whatever. There's 10 million people in Michigan, or maybe a little less. That's, whatever that is, 300,000 people, or, whatever that is, 30,000 people. Can you imagine 30,000 people standing up and like, oh yeah, so you're not doing that? Game over. So I think that kind of, answers some of that. But I think it's a big question that people need to ask themselves of, hey, if I don't want to run from country to country every couple of generations, then we probably should stand up and let the government know, no, you work at the consent of us, just like our founding document said. You work at the consent of the governed, not the other way around.
Oof, hold on. Love it. And of course, guys, we are getting American centric, US centric here, but Bitcoin is a global phenomenon. And I heard this saying one time, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, but someone said, everyone knows this saying, like, American is apple pie. And then someone told me, it's like, yeah, well, apple pie was made in France. So like that's part of the American ideals of you just co-opt things and then like, this is mine now. But as we know, Bitcoin does allow us to have the right to vote with our feet and our money. It's the ultimate form of voting, obviously, as the saying goes, with your pocketbook, but also because you can literally take up your wealth and go anywhere around the world. Like, I think we can have both these ideas where we understand that Bitcoin does give us this newfound freedom, living the sovereign individual thesis. Like, this is happening in real time, and there will be people that go to better jurisdictions. But I also feel like Bitcoin has enabled the globe to have the same ideals of freedom that the American founding fathers wished for our country. And now everyone has that power or that choice or that ability to be like, no, I am sticking to my roots. And you can't fucking rob me anymore. You can't take my wealth anymore. Back it up with not every country has the 1A or the 2A, but in America we do. And it's like, come and take it. And it's that mentality of, I am a free and sovereign individual no matter where I go on planet Earth because of Bitcoin. And if I so choose to pick up roots here, then hopefully I will be surrounded by other people that also believe in the same thing. And that's, again, back to building a community around you, because I really do believe that Bitcoin is exporting the ideas of America: private property, freedom of speech, freedom of transaction, freedom of association to the whole world, because no longer are we being robbed by money. And I don't know about you, but like, I'm not the most patriotic, but I just love my home. And if I can use Bitcoin to not only stay where I love, but also help my family transition in this great transition, because we all know, fiat's a sinking ship. We don't know when it's going down, but we know it is going down. And not everyone wants to store in hard assets like, real estate or gold or something like that. Maybe they want something ephemeral that they can literally just pick up and go if they ever had to. And I think having these plan Bs in the back of your head, it's like you're battling two thoughts. One, it's like, I don't want to leave. I never want to leave, but also, if shit really did hit the fan and things got absolutely crazy, at least we know that we have those abilities. So I'm still like, it's hard to weigh both of these ideas at the same time, because I don't want to leave here. I love here. I think we have the best country in the world, but also, now we've exported this, or rather Satoshi Nakamoto exported this. Maybe a Japanese man, or maybe he's not Japanese. Maybe he's from the UK. Who knows? But he's exported these ideas to everyone and gave everyone that ability, freed all of humanity. And what more is the American idea than giving freedom to everyone that is a part of this nation? And now it's just anyone that's a part of this money, the digital ecosystem. And it's just like, I don't know, man, I'm getting hyped and patriotic all at the same time, but also like on some cliche, like, a citizen of the globe. What's what's that one movie like Saving Sarah Marshall or whatever? But anyways, I totally digress. I totally digress. But all right,
Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
let's transition a little bit. You did say this earlier, and Foss says it all the time. Hashtag for the kids. I don't have kids yet, but I do look at the world, and I really, God willing, want a family. I want kids, and I look at the world, and it's as millennial, I do come from the West Coast, and I know a lot of people that have like that progressive thought of how can you have kids, and how could you bring children into such a messed up world like today? And it just always felt like defeatist. Like you're just a defeatist. It's like, I want to leave a better world. I'm going to do whatever I can to live a better world. And yes, I'm a flawed individual, but I'm still doing my best to improve the world, live by principles and truth, and not be a corrupt asshole and steal from people. Like we've been stolen from, our future's been stolen from. And I think, and I know you have this same energy. What we're doing here is trying to course correct humanity for the better by obviously empowering ourselves and our family and our friends. And if we all do this, then humanity can get back on course to what was taken from us. And this is what we're doing. Like it's for the kids, whether you have them or not. It's about leaving a better world, about leaving a legacy that we can be proud of. I really do think we are living in the dark ages right now. Like it's the best time to be a human, but it's also probably one of the most confusing and just downright, I don't know, destructive, self-destructive moments in humanity. But what's your thoughts on this, Brandon? It's for the kids.
It is. I mean, it's I for all those who can have children, not everyone can have children, right? And that's very real. But find someone you love, and that's the person you're supposed to be with. And I promise you, it's a lot easier to have children. That's a words of advice. Because you truly when you find someone you love, you find your other half, you want to have children with that person. And you can't extrapolate this out to everybody, but man, I know so many people who really honestly got married because they were like, oh, we're together for like 8 years, 5 years, 10 years. And I guess that's the next step. That's not what it's about. Like that's not how life is supposed to be. You're supposed to find someone that makes you better. And that is your other half. And I've seen that with so many friends, family. And I know a lot of people now in early 30s, mid, late 30s are already divorced because of that. And it's just, that's a fact of life. It's sad. It's a reality we live in now. And it's because people, broke the money, quite honestly. I mean, let's be real. Why are we here? Like you kind of just mentioned, Opti. I mean, it's because the money's broken and we're trying to fix the money and course correct humanity because people feel like they can't get married. They have to wait because they want to do some, have money saved up, and then they can't have kids because they want to save up, and then they can't have kids at all, or then they're too old to have kids or whatever it is. And it's the saddest thing that we're going through. And quite honestly, again, this is maybe not the time or place to go down this road, but it's the destruction of the nuclear family and the generational family, right? I mean, for thousands of years, we lived generationally with not only our parents and our siblings, but also our aunts and uncles, maybe our grandparents. And you learned how to be a man, or you learned how to be a woman from those people. And now it's just gone. I mean, like now it's like, I don't know how to be a man or woman because I didn't have anyone to teach me that thing, how to do all that. And that's just a fundamental cracks in the foundation of life. And then we wonder, why are all these entitlements around? How come no one has any accountability or responsibility in their life? Well, why do you think? So the thing I can't stand is like so much of society is just putting band-aids on bullet holes. It's just, we're like a mile down the river, there's an oil spill up the river, and we're all down here with like a huge net trying to like get oil and siphon it out of the river instead of just going up to the plant and just fixing the oil spill there, and then the river cleans itself, right? And we just, as society, constantly are trying to do that. It's the government being the arson, the firefighter, making these mistakes purposely, probably a lot of times. And then, oh, we've got a solution for it. It's just, six-pack abs. We're constantly trying to do these things. And a lot of it is sped up time preference and high time preference because of the broken money. So it's making us feel like we can't do these things. But man, having 4 kids, you do see what life's all about at the end of the day. Like we said, we keep talking about picking up your cross and laying down your life. You realize what it's all about. And you realize at the end of the day, that is the next generation, right? That is humanity. That's going forward. And you realize that is your mission in life, is to, if you can have children, but have children, and they are the ones, they're the new warriors. They're the new people that are going to extrapolate this out and bring this on. And you really start to see life at a completely different level. So I think that, to me, is something that I know is one of my missions. Like I said, I'm going to be probably taping some of the stuff and doing little lessons with them, and then probably putting that out there, because this is, again, a different realm, but there's such little children's education out there. The school system's completely broken. We're doing stuff with Bitcoin trading cards, which is great, but even from like the 2 years old to up to like 6 years old, it's doing things. The Tuttle twins are doing some stuff, obviously, with some books, but like there's such a gap and they're so impressionable at that age, and they can learn so much, and that is the future. And again, we mentioned the guy from Germany in the 30s, and he knew, he talked about it. You control the youth, you control the future. Well, why are we letting evil people do it? Why aren't good people taking that and saying, hey, what are we doing here? We just have, basically Marxists and communists running the school systems for decades, really for dang near 100 years. The Frankfurt School coming over to Columbia and then starting to indoctrinate the teachers and the kids. And then for 100 years, we've had this movement towards collectivism and in rooting out of the family, the generational family, the nuclear family. And it's been a systematic effort. I mean, there's a lot of the stuff we have here. We talk about all the time. I've shared them on Simply, I've got the books sitting right here, ironically, the Capitalist Manifesto, Naked Communist, goes through all the goals, goes through the 45 goals they had from 100 years ago and they read them into Congress. Those are read into Congress in like the late 50s, the 45 goals of what they're going to do to destroy America from the inside. And we have I think they say we have 44 of them. So not all 45, so we're safe for now, but they have 44 of their goals have been already, successfully done here in America. And then we wonder why we have the problems we have. So it's, again, for ears that want to hear, for eyes that want to see, the information's there, the answers are there. It's just, again, it's getting to that 3% of people that do want it. I know a lot of people that are Bitcoiners, they just don't know it yet. I've orange pilled a lot of people, fortunately, over the last number of years, but there's still a ton of people I'm after, and they're huge Bitcoiners. They just don't know it yet. And so we're going to get there. We're going to get to that 3% in the next few years for sure.
Absolutely love it. Yeah, a few points, and then I'll pass it back to you. First off, at the very end, you reminded me of that Yuri Bezmenov clip that always makes the round on Twitter every once in a while, about talking about, the brainwashing via the collectivists, and all they take is like 3 generations and your society crumbles. I highly recommend everyone go watch that. I forget what it's called, but just type in Yuri Bezmenov on YouTube, and
it's like the 80s,
yeah,
right?
in the 80s,
early 80s.
XKGB, I don't know, propagandist or whatever you want to call him, agent, and he literally lays out the plan. And looking in hindsight, it really is mind blowing. And then also connecting it with what we're seeing in time, like in society today, it's like, wow, they really did what they said they were going to do, and everyone is still oblivious to it. And you're just like, wow, this is really a cultural war going on, and they really are coming after the kids. And this is part of where, like, recently, I've said this before on various podcasts, but I was very nihilistic. I had no goals before I found Bitcoin. And ever since I found Bitcoin, it's really been my North Star to be a better person, be a better man, be someone that can actually, be an example in my community. And part of that now is like, all right, I need to grow up. I need to find a wife and some kids. And my friend Joe Rogers, I go hang out with him every once in a while, and go hang out with him and his family and the wife. And I just absolutely love just seeing Joe interact with his kids, because he always says it like constantly with me. I don't know if you guys know Joe Rogers, but he works for Bitcoin Magazine, the physical zines, these ones. He's the one designing this over here, like the editor. And he always talks about the mimetic war going on, the guerrilla mimetic war that we are finding ourselves a part of. I say it in jest, but very seriously. We found ourselves in a $1 trillion PSYOP campaign, and you are on the front line. So welcome to the war, boys and girls. It's a mimetic war. It's an information war. But he always says the same thing, because this is all we do. We just conversate about like mimetics and, talk shop and stuff. And he always tells me the same thing. He's like, the best way to propagate the memes is by propagating the memes. And what he means by that is what I say and jest all the time as well. Is like the best way to create Bitcoin is by literally creating Bitcoiners and starting with the kids, and society will figure its way out as long as you are that shining example of what it means to be an awesome human, a Bitcoiner, and your kids will grow up in a world that is Bitcoin only. And it's absolutely amazing that this is where we are right now. You know, there's kids out there that have only lived in a Bitcoin world. And then circling back a little bit, um, Brandon, you said maybe this isn't the rabbit hole we want to go down, but it has been very, I think, thoroughly exposed and shown the connection and the statistics regarding relationships, divorce, single family homes, and them directly correlated with fiat currencies since 1971. Like, I don't think this is uncontentious. I know we try to avoid the conspiracy theory talks because it makes you sound loony, but I think if you connect the data, connect the dots, you can very clearly show that ever since fiat currencies have been propagated in society, that the nuclear family structure has been destroyed, and I would argue to the detriment of humanity. But that's a totally other tangent. We do have 10 minutes left, and I told you I want to be mindful of your time. I know you got the kids over there. I heard them before we started, but let's circle back to the very beginning. And you talked about being a part of hockey, and I find that a lot of Bitcoiners that I connect to, that I vibe to, also played sports as a kid. I was captain of my football team and lacrosse team in high school, and I've always had this hunger to get better, to achieve for more, to just try to be the best version of myself. And it really blows my mind that a lot of people are complacent out there, that they don't have the same hunger. And I really thought it was an inherent thing in humanity. But again, maybe part of my disillusionment was like, wow, maybe not everyone has that killer mentality. Like, you know, I remember being a killer in high school playing football and sports, and I thought everyone had this. But I think now might be a time where, Brandon, we can just talk about what that winning mentality looks like, because I think that Bitcoin has a way of instilling the winning mentality in people. And I think people should double down on that. I don't think we should demonize excellence. I think you should want to be the best version of yourself. You should want good things for your life. You should always strive for more. But at times I'm like, man, maybe I'm too like wishy-washy philosopher woo-woo. I'm like, we can all be better. But I don't know. I find like even Big Sean Harris has that same mentality of, you know, he's a professional basketball player, and he's a winner, man. And I know I see this happen with friends, and the ones that I see succeeding have that same winner, killer, just badass mentality. Some might call it alpha masculinity, whatever you want to call it, but like that warrior spirit of, we are in a war right now, an information war. Some might say a holy war, but we are in the midst of it. And you better prepare yourself now, as the saying goes. And Mike Hobart always says it to me. He's like, I'd much rather be, I think it's Confucius, I'd much rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And so this, I think, is my just PSA call to action of like, get that warrior mentality going, because I know Brandon has it. We've had these conversations in person and on Spaces, and I know you have that winner's mentality. And it's really back to the same basic premises we always talk about. You know, get fit physically, mentally, spiritually, log off from the internet, go touch grass, eat good food, have good relationships, and, you know, avoid all the BS. It's such a simple process. It's like tunnel vision. Keep your horse blinders on the mission, laser focused on the mission. And this is how we usher in a world. Anyways, I ranted. Brandon, tee you up, bro.
No, this is beautiful. And it's confidence, right? Zach, one of my buddies, who I don't know if you might have run into him in Miami, but he's a village idiot on Twitter. And I interviewed him recently as well. And he talks about accepting truth, ignoring truth, and submitting to truth. And trying to find a objective truth, right? But there's people that can just accept it, and it's like, okay, it just is what it is. And there's people that just ignore it, and there's like, okay, I'm going to jump off this building and I can fly. And there's people that submit to the truth. They use nature's law, first principles. They use it to their advantage. And those are the people, maybe the 3%, maybe it's people with, alpha, they have a lot of testosterone, whatever it is, like we've kind of talked about, that have that mentality. But I think it's I think it's truth. I really think I come back to truth, maybe authenticity in a way, but using your intuition, using your higher faculties. I think the one thing that, again, this main vein that runs through everybody, that you're referring to, is that fiat has created, again, we all know this high time preference where our attention spans are shorter and shorter, and we don't even have time to do anything of substance. It's just constantly like I'm in the rat wheel, and I'm just running, I'm punch in, punch out. I'm so tired at the end of the day because I'm asked to do so much, and because we got to get the next earnings, quarterly earnings call, that I'm just so tired, and I just got to throw the game on, and then I pass out with after drinking a 6-pack, and I wake up and do it again the next day. And the common theme I see of winners, of people that aren't in that world, they're questioning, right? They're questioning everything. Like, why am I doing that? Why? I constantly fought with teachers in middle school, starting in middle school, and then high school, big time, college, big time. And like, why are we doing this? When are we going to make money? Like, what does that have to do with anything? And I got worse and worse in school over time. I almost didn't graduate at Michigan State because I was so checked out. I was like, this is just idiotic. I mean, it just made no sense. Literally taking like basket weaving or women's studies, Western, I don't even know what it was. And it was just like I think there was making things up, and then just like, here, go take this class. And it was just like so nonsensical that it's like, what are we doing here? But the big thing for winners and the people I see, again, that you're referring to, is truth. They're after truth. They're after objective truth, and trying to find what that is, and not being satisfied with someone just telling them, hey, this is what it is, or hey, I'm going to take care of you, or hey, I'm going to DC to do this and that. It's constantly trying to find objective truth, and then submitting to that truth. And it could be God, it could be religion, it could be whatever it is, whatever someone is trying to do, but it's trying to find that truth, nature's law, and submitting to it. And then, I guess, in wrapping that up, it's the higher faculties we have as human beings, that most people, we have the 5 senses, see, smell, taste, touch, all that. But none of us really, and that's like the conscious part of our brain. And I'm using Bob Proctor to, like, where if anyone's seen Bob, where he draws like the human head and the body, and then you split it in half, and your conscious is there. So everything comes into your conscious, maybe your 5 senses, but then your subconscious, he kind of draws like in the bottom half of your head. And that's like the filter. That's like the gate. That's the gatekeeper of what you actually do. So like someone can tell you something, but most people's filter, like if I tell you the earth is flat or something like that, your filter, like, vast majority of people would just like, their filter just says wrong. And then they don't accept it into their body, right? They don't act that out. That, or I can say like, hey, you should probably eat some protein if you want to build muscle. And most people are probably gonna be like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I know, that makes sense. I've kind of heard that before. Cool. And then you accept it through that gatekeeper, that subconscious, and then you act it out. And then you're starting to take those actions, and those turn into results. Now you have like, okay, I'm eating some protein, maybe I'm having a shake after I work out and stuff like that. So that subconscious, though, you have 6 higher faculties, which I always like forget one of them, but it's imagination, will, reason, intuition, memory, and intuition. I don't know if I said intuition, but intuition is one of the big things. It's your gut, right? It's maybe you're conscious, but it's your gut. It's your gut feeling. And so few of us have refined those abilities. One, we're not taught them. Again, why are we not taught these in school? Again, that's for another day, what the reasoning is, but we're not using those higher faculties. We can't even we're just using the see, hear, taste, touch, and that's it. We don't even get to the habits or the paradigms we have. This gatekeeper, which a paradigm is a multitude of habits. So it's many habits built on top of each other create a paradigm. So whatever paradigm you think, like, again, we get into this whole, like, you'd be like you mentioned, conspiracies. And like we joked about this year's the death of conspiracies. Conspiracy theory was a term that was only first brought into like the vernacular after JFK was killed. And like the newspaper started running with it to basically discredit anyone who was talking about that or questioning it. And that's where like Lyndon Johnson came in, the big Secrecy Act, like, oh, we're going to get people that are laundering money and doing all that. That was actually like one of the first, that was like the beginning of Bitcoin in a way, probably 1964. It's the Bank Secrecy Act. And that was the KYC, AML, all that stuff started because of that. And then we took silver out of the coins then. And 1971 was kind of a little bit, not arbitrary, but that was kind of like that had to happen. Those things all had to happen just because of 1913. And so like all these things are in sequential order, but we have to get in touch and start understanding and understand the gatekeeper and what's allowing us to act a certain way, or what's controlling us, our paradigms and this multitude of habits. And if we're not refining that, if we're not aware of that, we're just going to go along like a robot, like a, an NPC, a non-playable character. And we're just constantly going around and just like, well, that's what they told me to do. That's what they told me to do. See, hear, smell, taste, touch. And if we're not in here in the subconscious, you're going to have a very, very hard time deciphering what's going on in the world, especially when nowadays, again, this is a talk for maybe another TTO or something like that. But when you start understanding that all these there's many societies and groups and things over the last 120 years, starting a lot of them in Britain and the United States, that are controlling people's thoughts. So like mass formation psychosis got really big here in the last few years with Matthias Desmet. That's like the end of the road almost. Like this started 120 years ago, and in these groups and these organizations to start controlling how people thought about things and what people should think, how long, what they should look at, how long they're going to look at it. And then, as soon as it gets burned out, we're on to the next thing. This is such a huge rabbit hole we could go down in, like literal like facts and like documented papers and videos and all these things you can go into and watch to start understanding why people are doing the things they're doing, and why the 97% just continually kind of go on, they jump on the rat wheel and they don't question things. It's a process, it's a 120-year process. And that's why this fight feels so big. Bitcoin will speed this process up. But again, in wrapping all this up, we only need 3%. Don't let it overwhelm yourself. Start, touch some grass, be the billboard, get right, get some water in you, build a family, and it will happen quicker than 120 years. I'm sure you that.
That's cool, motherfucking boy. Had to hit the soundboard, bro. And before we wrap up, and I'll give you one last soapbox before we wrap up. But I've been in the last year or so, obviously since I don't know, I got into Bitcoin, and probably before, and that's how I found Bitcoin. I always really relied on like just trusting my gut. And Nico will vouch for me. We'll literally have conversations like, "What should we do, bro?" And we'll just start going like, "What's your intuition say?" And I got him to basically say the same thing, back and forth. Originally, it was like, "Yo, Nico, like just trust your gut. Like, what is your gut saying? Let's go with that. Like, don't think about it. Just go with that." And now I got him on the path of like, he'll ask me like, "Opti, like, what's your intuition saying?" I'm like, "This is what we're going." He's like, "All right, cool. Shoot it. Like, don't think about it. Let's go. If we mess up, we'll course correct." But I highly recommend the same thing to all my friends and everyone out there. It's like, trust your gut. Your intuition knows a lot more than your logical brain does. And hey, I don't know how this works. All I know is that it does work. But before we go, I just gotta hit people with the memes, wrapping up today's show, and then you can roll this one out, Brandon. But burn the ships, become obsessed with the ultimate truth, become obsessed with the state of your soul, become the best version of yourself, propagate the memes, and this is how we usher in the Bitcoin standard. What a rip, man. I'm sure we could do another 3 hours like we did, but go watch Freedom Isn't Free show with Brandon Gentile on YouTube. And you'll get some of this sauce. This is the condensed version. I try to keep these around an hour, but we'll have to bring you in, bro. Next time we get revved up on something, we'll bring you in. But any last words? What's the last words for someone out there? We got people in the audience listening. What would be the last message you want to send the people off tonight with?
Yeah, I mean, my big thing is, and we touched on it a little bit too, is use your intuition and have faith and trust your gut, but trust that again, we've talked about the Bible a bit. I know not everyone is religious, but in the Bible, God says that hey, if I provide for the birds, the least among you, or the birds, animals, do you think I'm not going to provide for you? And I think that that's something that I've seen so much in my life, not just with me. I've seen it with myself, and maybe like having moments of weak faith and seeing it in other people, where I was scared to make the jump. I was scared to do something, and just have faith, and have faith and know that, hey, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Again, from dust we came, and to dust you shall return. What are you going to look back on your deathbed and think? What's the hyphen in between the two dates? What did that say? I think that's something to leave everybody. And that's where I know my mission going forward is to continue educating as many people as possible and doing the writing. I've talked about it simply before, some the children's books, some basic stuff, starting with basic stuff, ABCs of Bitcoin, EFGs, have a couple of different versions of it. There's a bunch of stuff to go through, but starting with children's books. And then we're ramping out with Bitcoin trading cards, obviously, and doing a lot of that, and then building that up over time to educate the normies, educate the no coiners or pre-coiners, educate the children. because that's going to be the simplest, quickest way, the memes, right? The art, the memetics, and getting that into the masses as quick as possible so we can have the least amount of collateral damage. So accepting truth and submitting to truth, and lay down your life to pick up your cross, doing the right thing, right? And that at the end of the day, following the gut.
Let's go. Wow. We did the rep justice, Brandon. I'm glad we brought you on. If you want to hear me and Brandon do this basically on a daily basis, come hang out with us on Twitter Spaces. We do this all the time. But before I roll this out, I know this is a Bitcoin show, and obviously we got a little philosophical, we got a little economic, maybe we got a little conspiratorial, maybe we were pontificating, but I think these are the messages that more people need to hear. It's about the humanity of this. It's what we say all the time about winning the hearts and minds of the masses out there. And part of it is much more than just financial. Yes, fix the money, fix the world is the fundamental axis that everything else will get fixed on and will get balanced on. But a lot of times you got to fix your mind and your ass will follow. And this is part of that warrior spirit, that warrior mentality of, what are you here to do as a Bitcoiner? What is your ultimate end? Are you here to fix the world, or are you here just to get rich? They don't have to be mutually exclusive. It can be both the same, but just be honest with yourself. If you're here just for a Lambo, then, you might get a little frustrated. But if you're here to usher in a better world, with number go up, freedom will go up. And I think this is why I've committed everything to this, because I really do believe in the ideas of, if more and more people save in Bitcoin as number goes up, hard cap money, your life will improve. And that's what we're all here to do, is to improve your life, live a good life, live a better life, because the psychopaths that are in control right now are messing everything up, and they've done it on the backs of all of our labor, and they do it with your consent. And this is about us taking back that consent, about taking back our lives, taking back our energy, our labor, our money, and telling them to go fuck themselves. Anyways, Brandon, really appreciate this. As I said, we could probably do this for another hour. But guys, go follow my boy Brandon _Gentile on Twitter, or go to his YouTube, Freedom Isn't Free Show. And I'm glad that we can do this, Brandon. Chill out for like 20 seconds while I roll this one out, and we'll continue to chat a little bit after the show.
Yeah. No,
all right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. I know this is a little different. I'm coming back to the original intentions of TTO. It's about getting cosmic. It's about spreading that Bitcoin signal. You guys know that I'm absolutely obsessed with the psychological, cultural phenomenon that is Bitcoin, the philosophical phenomenon that is Bitcoin, the implications of society that Bitcoin will revolutionize. Bitcoin is the revolution. Stay humble, stack sats, stay solvent. This is the way, guys. Propagate the memes by propagating the memes, and you are a walking billboard for Bitcoin. I will see you guys tomorrow on the Simply Bitcoin live show, the daily show. Until then, guys, I'll find another friend to come rant with you guys on the TTO. All right, guys, peace out. Have a good night. Get some good food. Get some good rest. Get a good workout in. Call your mom and tell her you love her. Whatever you need to do to continue to build on your relationships, do that, guys. It's about becoming a better version of yourself. This is what Bitcoin allows. Anyways, peace out, guys.